Everyone get out!
Hello tankers and tankettes, welcome to a viewer spotlight double feature. Today I'm looking at a pair of replays of the SU-101, which is one of the tier 8 Soviet tank destroyers. It's the one that isn't an ISU. It's the newer line, and honestly the tier 7 and 8 have a pretty bad reputation. It gets better with the tier 9 and 10, but there are some hallmarks of the tier 7 and 8 particularly that kind of also carry over the 9 and 10, but that make them less popular. The 9 and 10 are better because they have better guns, and the tier 10, yeah, I don't know what the reticle's doing there. This is a 9.0 replay. That was a particular bug with these. The guns get better at 9 and 10, and the tier 10 especially has got very troll frontal armor. The tier 7 and 8, not really. The tier 9 doesn't get particularly good armor anyway, but what makes the tier 7 and 8 not particularly good is their guns. Now with tier 7 you've got basically the same gun in terms of pen and damage as you do on the SU-100. Now you also get that on the SU-152, but of course SU-152 gets the derp, and you mostly see people using the derp. You don't get that option with the tier 7. It's the same gun, it's 175 pen, and although the mobility is alright, they've also got cripplingly bad, or even cripplingly bad, gun depression. So that's not so fun. You basically, so far as I can tell, you have to kind of play it like a turretless medium, kind of, but it's not especially good at that. Anyway, Nokijuxas has got himself into this position, and he's going to hopefully put some early hurt on this guy. He's angling fairly well here. He's actually kind of side scraping. Not something you usually do in a tank destroyer, but the side armor on this is really good enough for the matchmaking that we've got anyway. You wouldn't try this against tier 10s. That he can actually potentially bounce shots here. Now of course also bear in mind there is artillery, and there it is. Yeah, side scraping doesn't work so well against artillery. Whether or not this was a foolish idea to even try it in this spot, well, you don't know where artillery is aiming right up until the point where it hits you. Unlike other tanks where you can see them and spot them, not all the time, but you've got a decent chance. With artillery, you've just got no idea where they're aiming, so yeah. Anyway, it takes out that M6, and the gun on this, the alpha damage is alright, but it's not especially great. We're kind of talking, in terms of penetration, I mean, it is the worst of all the tier 8 tank destroyers. The next worst is actually the AT-15, so it's not like this is super terrible bad once you get to tier 8. It's, I think, 219 average pen. The AT-15 has the 20-pounder guns, same as the heavy, same as the medium, so they've all got 226. So this is like just behind the heavies for its tier. So if you're top tier, that's alright. Against tier 9s, that's not so good. But if you compare it, you know, like for like, if you compare it with the rest of the tank destroyers, they've all got pens, apart from the AT-15, they've all got pens that are in the kind of 240 odd, 250 odd in the case of the AC-46. You know, they're all much, much better. And in this, it's really hampered by that penetration and the gun depression especially. I think it makes this not particularly fun tank to play. Now you can see there the gun depression, he's actually right in front of this guy, but he's struggling to get the lower front plate. And his armor, well, he bounced one off the side, one went in his tracks, and he's struggling with the frontal armor on this guy. He's only got 3 heat shells. Oh, that's a lucky bounce. Now I did actually see one replay. I basically looked through all the SU-100 SU-101 replays, and there we go, an easier target with the commander's hatch, but he's only got 34 health now, so this is suddenly interesting. I looked through all of them, and there was actually somebody who'd sent me one with a Pool's Medal and a Kolobanov's, but that match had some problems, so I decided not to use that in the end, because I knew if I had, even a little bit of splash would have been very nasty there. Yeah, if I'd used that replay, even though the end result screen was impressive, I don't know, I just didn't feel that that was a appropriate replay for the channel. So if the guy that said that is watching, yes, it was good in terms of end result, but there were other things about that that I didn't particularly think would be appropriate. So the IS-3 is going to finish off this Tiger II. You can see at least the mobility. I mean, the top speed's not fantastic, but it accelerates fairly well. I don't know what the terrain passability is like. You know, I do not have one of these. My highest tank destroyer for the Russians is the SU-152. I actually still have the SU-100. I'm slowly grinding out this. Maybe not with an aim to buy it right away, but eventually, at some point. Now the minimap's not looking too clever. It's 5-8. This IS-3's got a bunch of health, but there's bound to be... I mean, we look at the enemy matchup, we see there's a couple of enemy tanks spotted. There's bound to be a couple of campers. Either people that were looking out across the other way and have come back to defend the cap, or people that were just always sat there and never even bothered moving up to the city. It's just like, you know, now's their time to shine, you guys! I don't know, it used to be that actually going into the city was just plain stupid and that defending was the better idea. But not these days. These days, if you've got enough from the southern cap coming into the city, you can have a fairly tough fight, although I still feel the north has an advantage on this map. Anyway, we see around our cap, oh there we go, that's one of the tank destroyers down, but the IS-3's taken a hit from something. If we see around the cap, there is an IS and a T-29, a couple of lower tier mediums and a Hellcat, our artillery's down as well. This is maybe still winnable, maybe. Noki obviously thinks that going back to the cap is the better thing to do at this point. I'm not convinced, but maybe he figured there was stuff behind those mediums that they wouldn't be pushing without backup. So I'm not sure. The IS-3 is going it alone. It's a risk. It's a big risk. And unfortunately it's not going to pay off because there's an AC-48 who was there as well. So that's the Hellcat down. GW Tiger P goes shotgun mode. Our IS-3 is down, gets taken out by artillery, and Noki is just powering towards the enemies that are spotted here. Now the T-29 is... he's kind of lowish health. IS has got more health, but believe me, more from the IS later. That IS is going to prove to be a bit of a thorn in our side, even though he's on our team. So that's the D down. There's another D over there, 3001 D. So that's the tier 6 rather than the tier 7. And it's now the case that this is the last 3 remaining tanks apart from artillery. So this could be tricky, especially if they have a tier 6 tank destroyer. Tier 8 tank destroyer rather. It all comes down to that enemy tier 8 tank destroyer plus artillery, because this VKD isn't going to last too much longer. There we go. So the AC-48 is almost certainly full health. Now Noki has got his head screwed on. He knows the very best chance is if everybody goes in together. If they go one by one, they're just going to die. But if they go in together en masse, then they can hopefully overwhelm this AC-48, then take out artillery, and that's that. So he's trying to get people to come with him. The T-29 is like, yeah, that is a good plan. So the T-29's going for it. Noki's trying to point out the way on the minimap. He's trying to get this IS to come with him. And I don't know... I think, honestly, there's about a 90% chance that this IS is a bot, and you'll see what I mean at the end of the match. Now, at this point, it's hard to tell. He might not be a bot. He might just not be... He might be just ignoring the minimap suggestions. He might just not be a very good player, and he decides to sit there, and decides in air quotes, because I'm pretty sure this guy was actually a bot. So we're going to have to try and do this with 2 very badly beat up tanks, and at this point Noki must be wishing that he hadn't taken that artillery hit at the beginning, because he's only been hit twice, once by artillery and once by that 110. And I think the 110, maybe he had the 122mm, I'm not quite sure. There's the AC, he actually went into the city, and he's about to take out our artillery, which is unfortunate. This is kind of a good news, bad news situation, because he's there, And bear in mind that AC-48 is no slouch in the mobility department itself. It's probably not quite as good as the 101, but it's not a particularly slow machine. So the AC is there, which means they are free to take out artillery if they don't get really unlucky and artillery takes them out instead. So first one in the Lorraine. This is that lack of alpha damage kind of hurts in this situation. You can't even one-shot an artillery that's the same tier. And I think it has got by far and away the lowest alpha damage of any of the tier 8s, the tier 8 tank destroyers. It's using a 100mm gun, and it just does not have the punch. So the T-29 takes out that Lorraine. We know where the other two were spotted by the IS-3. I'm not quite sure what Noki's doing here. He might just be sort of jinking around a bit to minimise the chance of being hit by the remaining artillery. There's the AMX-13F. He's not going to stop here because that would actually be pretty silly. Firing on the move is probably not the best thing to do with this, but stopping in this particular circumstance would be even more foolish. So he hits the guy in the track, and this guy at least he can one-shot. He takes a moment to aim there. Now the M12 was right in the corner. There's been no sign of the AC-48 at our cap. That's pretty crucial. If you can notice something like that on the minimap, then you can be fairly sure that, uh-oh, that M12 is coming for him. Oh, he's coming for him! T-29, help! T-29 bounces, and oh, I don't know if the guy wasn't loaded, but he just drives past. And if he'd been able to hit Noki, well, that could have been bad. And you see there, that T-29, he's down to his last 118 hit points as well. But as I was saying, we can fairly assume that AC has come back. That once these guys got spotted by their artillery, and there he is, that he decided to come back rather than go and cap. And that's the smart move from the AC, because if he'd gone to our cap, well, the IS hasn't moved. If he... oh, okay, there we see from the M12 that the T-29 shot his gun, knocked out his gun. Now, this is it. We've got this guy, right? This is the last guy. But look what he's doing. He's shooting the side. Remember that lack of alpha damage? The guy repairs his track, and... oh, no. If he shot the axle one more time... that was a really crucial mistake there, and the T-29 dying was unfortunate. But you see what I mean? If the IS had been there as well, 3 versus 1, we would have won that. Even if Noki had still made that exact same mistake, we surely would have won. So there's this IS, and I'm actually going to speed this up now. You'll see what I mean. He's just sitting in a bush. This is now the last 2 minutes. The AC may or may not get there in time, but he's sat motionless in a bush, and the turret's just turning and turning and turning and turning. And this is why I'm 90% sure this guy was a bot, because this is fairly solid bot behavior. When you see someone that's just sat there and the turret's just turning in random directions, yeah, that's a... I'm gonna, call that a bot. I am like 90% sure. So this one bot, this one very likely bot, basically cost us the match. But you could also say that Noki's massive mistake there cost him the match as well. And to be fair, we've all been there. We've all made that one stupid mistake that you then sit and think, why? Why? If he tracked the guy one more time, he's got the reload for it. The SU-101 has got a very good reload. That's one of the ways in which Wargaming's tried to make up for the lackluster penetration for a tank destroyer. The lackluster alpha damage is they've given it a very good DPM. But he didn't. I don't know, for whatever reason, and we've all had that, where you just have that brain fart and you're so fixated on, gotta kill the guy, and then you make that one critical mistake and you end up dying instead. That must have been pretty gutting. We see there, I mean, the IS was the only one that survived. He actually did do some damage to the IS, but there were a bunch of lower tier mediums running around, and or same tier to the IS anyway, and the fact that they were driving to a place where a box shoot them, the fact that it did damage is absolutely neither here nor there. And that enemy AC-48 didn't have a particularly great game either. For most of it, they were sat near the base. And it's just such bad luck that Noki... I mean, he by far and away, he had a high caliber medal. That was actually his ace tanker and a top gun. And it was all down to that one mistake. At least it was a draw, not a loss. But even so, that could have so easily been a win, and it wasn't. And I had my head in my hands slightly at the end. But I do not judge too harshly, because like I said, I have done exactly the same sort of mistakes where you're really caught up in the moment and your brain just goes out the window and you don't do that one thing you should have done, and that's it. At least in this case it was only a draw, but a draw is just a loss for everybody, really. So there you go. Still 1300 XP on a draw, ace tanker on a draw. Just think what it could have been if it was a win though. So our next match we're going to jump into will be a happier one, as we shall see. So here's replay number 2. This is courtesy of Syvarris223, and he is actually platooned up with, now let's see, it's Lord Benjamin and Slider, and they're both in the clan, or they're all three of them in the clan 2BE. So this time we're going to get a platoon game. We're top tier again, and I think that's probably about the only way to have a really fantastic game in the SU-101 is to be top tier. Because if you're in a tier 10 match, that 219 pen isn't going to count for much. He's carrying a few more heat rounds this time. I have seen, there was a couple of the replays where people were carrying like as many heat rounds as they were AP rounds. And I can kind of understand it with this gun. I mean, the fact is it's only a little bit behind the heavy tank guns for the tier, but it is still behind them. But when you compare it, like I've said, compare it to the rest of the tank destroyers. And the AT-15, which I also mentioned as having not particularly fantastic penetration for the tank destroyer, that has got an even better rate of fire than this, and it's got much better accuracy as well. At least as far as I know it does. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, or maybe Caption Guy will get there first. Who knows? But yeah, this time round we are going to go to this corner. This is fairly critical, and this is a 9.0 replay. Both of these have been 9.0 replays, so you can see there this is not the 9.1 Arctic map. This is the slightly older style one. So he's going to sit here and see what he can see. He is behind a bush, but he's not, I mean, he's right behind a bush, so he's, every time he's firing he's going to demask himself. Don't think he's been spotted yet, however. I think he's got Sixth Sense in this one. I'm not sure. We'll soon know if not. Also, we've got the funny thing where it's saying Colorblind Squad, so just ignore that. Lord Benjamin is the one in the T69, and Slider, or whatever his name was, is in the 30. So Lord Benjamin is, well, you can see there, it's actually showing up in the minimap, it's just not showing up in-game. So there's an Incautious Tiger. This gun is more than enough for the unangled front armour of a Tiger. And that guy, you know, pretty hastily backs down. He just lost like half of his health in one go. It's going to be a bit of a slow start to this match. And you see on the minimap there, there's actually a decent number of tanks in the south, although we have just lost the other 30 on the team who was there. There's also, from what we can see in the traces, the enemy team have got a few tanks up here as well. Although the Tiger 2 is possibly the only one they're going to have to be really careful about. They've actually got mostly tier 7s, but there's an ISU over there. That might be problematic, maybe. Especially if he has the big gun, which we should probably assume that he does. If you see an ISU, it's usually safest to assume that it's got the big gun. You don't want to go, oh, I'm sure it's got the stock gun, and then find out that it doesn't. Yeah, that's probably going to end badly. So there's a Tiger P, KV-1S, and the Hellcat being a bit too bold. And the Hellcat, you can just about see from the silhouette that he's actually got the stock gun. And there's the Tiger 2, he might be tricky. Tries for a blind shot on the Hellcat. The Hellcat has just vanished. That's a thing that's going to change in the spotting system, by the way. Tanks will no longer vanish in the open like that. But there are also going to be some other changes upcoming with 9.2 as well. So, He's looking for another shot on the Tiger, but Slider actually gets there first. And he's being... Yeah, good thing the Tiger 2 shot Slider, or possibly the Tiger. I'm not sure who he shot there. But we see there, yeah, the Hellcat. That's a bit of a giveaway, the fact he only did that amount of damage. Probably into the lower front plate from this angle. We had some bounces in the last battle, but it's, I think, one of those ones where you do not ever rely on the armour. You only really get good armour once you get to the tier 10. I think even the tier 9 doesn't have especially good armour. It's just like the tier 10, it's still got the terrible gun depression, but finally you get some absolutely amazing armour to go with it. And the only real frontal weak spot on the tier 10 is the lower front plate. Although if you've got high enough pen gun, I think you can get the gun mantlet as well, which is a kind of reasonably sized target. But you need kind of like 250 plus penetration for that particular target. Anyway, there's the Tiger over there to the left, but he's kind of fallen down. Our Tiger is facing off against the Tiger 2, but he has got some backup, and he's tracked. It's a good job. I think Syvarris was trying for the track again, but unfortunately the KV-1S kind of just pulls in front, and then he muffs that shot slightly. Could have had that KV-1S. It's only a KV-1S, but on the other hand, a KV-1S still has a more than good enough gun to hurt him. And certainly to hurt a Tiger. Looks like that T-34-1 is also coming up to this corner. The southern corner, however, has gone very badly. There is now just an IS-6 and a T-34-85. And they really haven't had much of an impact on the enemy team in that particular corner. So we're at 5-9 now. This is going to be hard work to bring this back. There's the T-34-1. Who has decided to rush this Tiger, clearly, just heedless of the fact there are tank destroyers backing him up. So he's just getting quite thoroughly spanked here. He was firing on the move, not even hitting the Tiger, I think. The Tiger 2 decided to follow it up, but he's just taken a big hit, and there we go. He gets... his name, by the way, was I Love Carol Cleveland. Okay then, okay. Sometimes you just see the usernames in this game and you think, yep. Yep. Now, Slider and Syvarris have been doing most of the work here. I think Lord Benjamin, you see there, he's got most of his health. He's got all of his health, in fact. I'm not quite sure. He's been possibly a bit more passive than you should be when you're in a top tier medium. And yes, I know the T69 doesn't have an amazing gun either. But I think he could have done more. However, they're all... 3 of them still alive and operating as a squad, and that IS-6 is down. And this is the part where being in a platoon actually... Yes, they've abandoned that Tiger, but the Tiger, against all sensible reason, has gone in on his own, when we know there's an ISU down there still somewhere. You might have noticed Syvarris actually pinged the Tiger to not go that way. The Tiger ignored that advice and he's now dead. So we are now just down to this platoon. Now, Benjamin's taken point because he's got the most health. Not quite sure why Syvarris is going after the P, but the VKP, I should say. Maybe they were coordinating on TeamSpeak to divvy up the targets between them, but in this kind of situation, when you've got a T-28 prop, actually concentrating fire to take down the most dangerous target would have been the smarter thing to do. So he's down. The T-20 was last spotted on that corner, but hasn't appeared. So we're not quite sure where he is. We know where the other guys were last spotted. This could be tricky with the ISU. The ISU is a big threat. Now, Syvarris has got most of his health left. Benjamin lost, what, half of his? And I've forgotten his name again. Slider. Wow. I don't know why I'm not remembering that, but I'm not. He's taken a bit of a battering. So, oh, there's that Tiger. Now, the other Tiger at least gave us the information that he was low health, but something bad's about to happen. Yes, it's the big gun. Yes. So, we know where the ISU is. We still don't know where the T-20 is, except now we do. The T-20 was actually being sort of sensible in that he saw those tank destroyers go up there and get nuked, and maybe he had an inkling that these guys that were here would be able to defend the cap. So what he did was go and join the remaining tanks on this flank, which is, if you're in a medium tank, going from one flank to another, I think flexing is the term that some people use. Not a terrible idea, because those other guys just popped over that ridge, got picked off one by one, and that was, you know, not a good plan, as it turned out. Lord Benjamin is E9. I'm not sure why he's in E9, because we know where the remaining two guys are. Slider is in more of a position to help. I mean, Benjamin might be able to get shots from where he is to, you know, some bits of where Syvarris is, but I'm not convinced. That's not really a good position. Splitting up when you know where the enemies are remaining is not the best plan. Now, I'm not quite sure what Syvarris is trying to do here. He's backed off, and you see that gun depression on this thing's terrible. There's the ISU. ISU fires and misses. Now, he's low health, and ideally Syvarris would just be able to go in and nail that guy. But there's this T20 to take care of, and the T20 unfortunately kills him. Slider gets the ISU, which is great, and Benjamin finishes off that low health T20, and there we go. Day saved. The match was won, and that was, I think you could say, a fairly nice platoon carry. It wasn't, I mean, Lord Benjamin especially was in some odd places on that match. I'm not quite sure why he went to some of the places that he did go, but generally speaking, I mean, 2 out of 3 of the platoons stuck together for most of that, and they were able to work together fairly effectively. And as that kind of platoon work can, as you can see, that really turn the tide of battle. And despite the shortcomings of the SU-101, Syvarris was actually able to do quite a nice amount of damage there. 6 kills and 5.1k damage. The next best of anybody was actually Slider with the 30. And then after that, there's a bit of a drop-off on all the teams. We have the enemy 110 with 2600. The ISU actually didn't do that much damage, it must be said. He only did 1895. He was camping, dare I say it, for most of that match. He did actually swing into action at the end there, but he had lost a lot of health and therefore wasn't really able to influence the outcome particularly either way. So that was close, but they made it a win, and they largely did the right things, and they largely kept their heads and made the right calls at the right points. It wasn't 100% flawless by any means, but even with a few small mistakes, it is possible to carry through a match like that. And the result was, I mean, very good for Syvarris. He got a top gun on a high caliber. Only his first class mastery though, and that's because he only got 1200 base XP. And we saw in the other one that Noki had, what was it, 1300, nearly 1400 base XP. So obviously these matches were played on different weeks as well. That they're not exactly, it varies from week to week how much you're going to need for that ace tanker. But I suspect Syvarris probably came quite close to getting an ace, but it just wasn't enough, even though it was a pretty good performance. So the SU-101, I may try this at some point eventually, maybe, but I'm in no rush to try out this particular tank destroyer line. Everybody knows about its problems. It's one of those lines where if you're going up it, you're probably going up it to get to the tier 10, and the tanks along the way are not really any of them particularly good, particularly fun, particularly worth keeping. Maybe the tier 9 is, I don't know. People in chat will tell me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure this tank has got its fans, that there are people out there that appreciate the mobility and the DPM, even if they struggle with the pen. You know, maybe they just load lots of premium ammo, I don't know. That's one way to get through a grind of this nature. But anyway, as per usual, if you enjoy these replays, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.